It's official. Google is a monopoly. And this is a 286-page memorandum opinion with some stunning revelations about how Google, and in particular Google Ads, works. Now yes, Google is one of the most incredible inventions ever conceived, and the Google Ads business is phenomenal. As marketers, we've written books like How to Get to the Top of Google, and we've helped our clients generate millions of dollars in revenue through SEO and Google Ads. But I think every marketer needs to be aware of some of the revelations in here because they show that Google is not your friend. Okay, so we're going to break this stuff down into two areas and explain what each thing means for marketers, what we actually need to do about this stuff. Firstly, we're going to look at Google being naughty to suppress competition from other search engines. Then we're going to look at how Google's being devious with their PPC pricing to force advertisers to pay more for their ads. So let's start with search engines. Google has long been the dominant search engine. Why does this matter for the world of marketing? Well, it means that we marketers have only really had to focus on ranking on one website. We could write a book called How to Get to the Top of Google, and that was basically synonymous for SEO. Because Google was so dominant, we didn't really have to worry about other search engines. Even the rise of AI search doesn't seem to have dented Google's dominance. In fact, its market share is still about 90%, and its ad revenue has continued to climb. Fundamentally, this ruling decides that Google has got that dominant position, not just by being the best, but also by anti-competitive and exclusionary tactics. Alright Tim, who cares? People search on Google all the time, we're just going to rank our websites on Google and advertise on Google. What's the big deal? Is any of this actually going to change? Well, perhaps not, but also perhaps yes. See, this ruling details something called the ISA, which is an agreement between Google and Apple, where Google agreed to share its revenue from ads with Apple. As part of this agreement, Apple was prevented from really building and rolling out its own search engine. And this is despite Apple actually putting in some of the groundworks to improve its own search offering, even hired the former head of Google Search and built some of the foundational capabilities to have its own search engine. But Google paid Apple around $20 billion a year to essentially sit on its hands and not do anything about this. In fact, when Apple did start building some additional functionality, for example suggesting websites when users typed a query in, Google said, nope, not anymore. And they put a new clause into the contract which prevented Apple from building this functionality out further. This agreement also stated that if Apple ever wanted to run ads, it essentially had to give Google the right of first refusal. Now, none of this is to say that Google isn't a good search engine. Google really is. And these documents actually detail some of the conversations that Apple has had with other search providers like Microsoft, where they've actually just come to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter what Microsoft will pay, Apple would never use Bing as the default search engine. Microsoft even offered Apple 90% of their search revenue in order to make it the default search. When that was declined, Microsoft even offered to sell Bing to Apple. Apple declined because they said Bing was horrible at monetizing advertising and called it an inferior search engine. Okay, so what does this mean for us as marketers? Well, the remedies have yet to be decided. That will come later on. But one of the possibilities is that users will have to choose their default search engine rather than it just defaulting to being Google on all Apple devices. The question for us marketers is whether people will continue to choose Google as their default search engine, meaning that still becomes the search engine that we have to optimize our web content for. Now, my guess is that people will, but the competition may open up, particularly as more AI chatbots enter public awareness and AI search becomes more of a thing. So potentially this opens up search way beyond just Google. But as marketers, it's very possible this will mean we need to open up our thinking when we think about search marketing, and not just targeting Google, but also monitoring visibility and traffic from other alternative places like Bing, like Perplexity, like ChatGPT. Now, of course, at Exposure Ninja, we've been testing and ranking in AI search for quite some time, and we found that most AI search engines at the moment basically do a web search in the background and then rewrite the content from that web search. So if you want to rank in ChatGPT or Google's AI overviews, the first thing that you need to do is get ranking in the underlying web search. So in Google's AI overviews, this means ranking on Google. If you want to rank on ChatGPT, often you need to rank in Bing first because this provides the initial web search layer that ChatGPT can then rewrite. But also a word of caution. Remember that all of this change could take years to come to pass. Google is going to challenge this and the remedies have yet to be decided. One thing thing is for sure though, people will be making money today, tomorrow, next month, and next year ranking on the world's #1 search engine, and that is and will be Google. But we need to keep our eyes open for any signs that that is changing and making sure that we adapt quickly when it does. Alright, let's talk about the stuff that made me most angry, and that was the PPC stuff. This is wild. Before we get to that though, if you want some help with your digital marketing and you want some analysis from people who are on the forefront of this stuff, then you can request a free website and marketing review from the team here at Exposure Ninja. We'll take a look at things like your ranking in search, but also your website's performance and your visibility across social media. We'll take all of this information and we'll recommend a prioritized action plan that you can follow over the next 6 to 12 months. We'll send this to you as a video and it's completely free of charge. This is an incredible service. Not everybody is eligible though, so you do need to go and request a free website and marketing review from the team at Exposure Ninja at exposureninja.com/review. Alright, the PPC stuff then. This is wild. Let's do a quick PPC primer on how Google search ads are paid for. So we've got a Google search results page here and we've got a number of ad slots that advertisers can appear in. Now let's say that we've got 3 advertisers here. How does Google decide which advertiser shows in which slot? Well, each advertiser will bid a certain amount per click. This is the amount that they're willing to spend to get that click from Google. Let's say that advertiser 1 will spend $1, advertiser 2 will spend $2, and advertiser 3 will spend $3. Now Google will then do some calculation which combines these bids with other analysis like how relevant the advert is for the query that they're running it against. And what it will do is it will come up with a score. So each ad will have a score. Essentially what this means is that the more you bid, the higher the chance you have of appearing at the top and getting more clicks. Now Google runs a second price auction, which means that the top advertiser doesn't pay their bid amount for the click, they pay slightly more than the second place bidder. So in this case, the $2 bid was the second place, so advertiser 1 is going to pay slightly more than $2 for their click. Now over the years, Google has brought out more and more opaque ad products. This is a very simplified version, but over the years, Google has brought in more smart bidding strategies. I remember when, for example, Google brought out Google AdWords Express. This was supposed to be a simple service for small businesses where they could essentially hook their credit card in and then get people giving them a ring and showing up at their premises. Google would take care of all the ads, all of the placements. This was horrible. The clicks were so expensive because advertisers had very little control of what they were bidding against. Google basically just took as much money as it possibly could. If we fast forward to today, Google is very keen to push advertisers towards PMax, which is its AI-enabled advertising, where basically, again, you put your credit card details in, you load up a bunch of ads, and you let Google do the placements for you. Now, let me be clear. We've had some incredible results for clients with PMax. It can be an immense source of revenue and very profitable revenue too. But you need to know what you're doing with it because it's another one of these black box ad technologies where you have less control and less visibility to be able to turn some of the dials that you used to in the olden days. By olden days, I mean like 10 years ago. Well, cue my delight when we get to see in this ruling at a high level the formula that Google is using to calculate which ads go where. To my knowledge, we've not had this level of transparency before. Now, if you don't really like mathematical formulas and all of that, don't worry. In the words of Sam Smith, stay with me. We need to cover some of this stuff very briefly in order for the next section to make sense. But if this stuff turns you off, that's okay. I'm going to explain it in plain English anyway. So here's the formula Google's using. So we've got the bid. This is how much an advertiser is willing to spend on their click. We have the PCTR, which is the predicted click-through rate, so the likelihood that somebody will click on that ad. And then we have something called beta, which represents blindness. Now, there's not a ton of detail about what this actually means. The doc says, which tries to approximate future engagement with ads, but all of this produces the LTV, the long-term value. And it's this LTV which Google uses to decide where to place an ad on the page. The higher the LTV, the higher that ad is going to place on the page. Got it? Cool. Now, this is supposed to be a fair auction, i.e. you can influence where your ad shows up by deciding to pay more. If it's a competitive search, there are going to be other bidders who increase the cost of the clicks. So you're going to have to spend more for competitive searches than uncompetitive ones. And this ruling details the nitty-gritty of exactly how it's done this. But it turns out Google has had its thumb on the scale to hike prices for advertisers through things called pricing knobs. There are a few of them detailed in here, but I'm going to call out a couple of them because I think they're really important for advertisers to understand. The first way it does this is through something called squashing. Now remember our equation. The higher the LTV, the higher your ad should show on the page. Now what squashing does is it actually artificially raises the LTV score of the second place bidder. This means that they've got a chance of showing up first in the ads even though they bid less. Now why would Google do this? Well, apparently what they wanted to do was prevent runaway winners and create a chance for smaller advertisers to participate in the auction. Oh, Google's basically a charity helping the small businesses. Or maybe Google just doesn't want large advertisers dominating, because remember, Google also really cares about its users. Except, squashing actually just effectively simulates artificial auction pressure, right? By making the second bid more competitive, the top rated bidder has to spend more to maintain that dominance. On average, the winner of an auction subject to squashing pays more than they would have without it. Google doesn't care about the small business, they just want to extract more revenue out of the big business. So basically, as a result of squashing, the same advertisers are winning 95% of the time, they're just paying more to do it now. Of course, for marketers, this demonstrates the importance of not being overly attached to having your ad showing in first place, because you may be paying way more than you need to for that honor. But Google's very innovative and has come up with all sorts of other ways to increase advertisers' costs, including something called RGSP, or Randomized Generalized Second Place Auction. Google's always been great at naming stuff. Now, similar to squashing, this affects the advertisers showing up in the top two positions. RGSP means that sometimes Google switches the LTV scores of the top two auction entrants. This means the runner-up sometimes wins. What happens? You've got it. This is essentially a more artificial auction pressure that Google has built into their systems, forcing the top bidder to pay more for their clicks if they want to maintain that position and get more traffic. Because if the top bidder doesn't want to lose anymore, guess what they have to do? Increase their bid. And of course, you can't opt out from RGSP because it's just too good at making Google money. Now, combining these pricing knobs and others means that Google has been able to increase prices by between 5 and 15%, usually a couple of times a year, without losing market share and systematically increasing their revenue. The reason that Google chose to raise prices incrementally using these strategies is because they actually wanted advertisers to see price increases as within ordinary price fluctuations or noise. They didn't want to turn these pricing knobs too hard and panic advertisers, so they just kept on nudging the knob 5 to 15% each time. Now, the ruling states that while advertisers could tell prices were increasing, they didn't understand these changes to be Google's fault. And in fact, Google studied the effect on advertisers and found that advertisers generally attributed these shifts to themselves, competition, and seasonality, not Google. In other words, the reason that Google made these subtle changes so that people would think it was something else. They didn't want advertisers to think that Google was systematically increasing their prices. Now, of course, you might say, well, Google's a business. Of course, it's going to make as much money as possible. That's its duty, is to provide value to shareholders. But for me, the thing that feels slightly icky about this is not just that Google has had its thumb on the scales to increase the prices for advertisers, but that it's done so very carefully in a way that advertisers would be blaming themselves or blaming their competition. It's perpetuated this myth that this is a fair auction being battled out by different competitive advertisers. All the while, it's been testing how far they can squeeze advertisers before they leave or move their budgets elsewhere. Further, Google actually intentionally made their ad product less transparent with the goal to create more crowded and higher priced auctions by doing things like reducing the amount of visibility on the search terms that were generating clicks, and by forcing things through like broad match keyword targeting. Now, when I spoke to our head of PPC about this, she echoed what many in the industry feel, which is that, there's been a suspicion that this type of thing has been going on for a long time. Google's ad services have become less transparent as they've nudged users towards smart bidding, increased opacity, and of course, rising cost per click. Now, I could go on for hours, there's more in here, but you get the gist. What do we do about this? What do we marketers have to change? Well, to me, the main takeaway from reading these documents is how you think about Google. A lot of businesses, a lot of marketers imagine themselves and Google sort of side by side growing the business. You talk to Google reps who always seem like they want to help you. When Google announces its new ad products, it's all AI powered and to help you maximize your revenue. The impression is that Google is a sort of a marketing ally. Let's be clear, Google is not a marketing ally. Google is an adversary that you must learn to game and manipulate for your own gain, because that is exactly how it's viewing you and your ad account. Which brings us to what you actually need to do, the practical next steps from all of this. Undoubtedly, Google has got harder to make money from over the 17 years that I've been running ads on Google. Now, just to be clear, Google Ads is an incredible product if you know how to use it. We make our clients tons of money, and I'm not suggesting for a second that you stop advertising on Google or you move your budget elsewhere on ethical grounds. All of the ad platforms are going to be acting exactly the same. This is a phenomenal platform, and its monopoly status is, I would argue, very well deserved. I have nothing against Google's desire to make money, but if you're going to use Google Ads or any of the Google tools for your marketing, you absolutely need to know what you're doing. You need to be wide-eyed and you need to have sharp claws. You need to know what good performance looks like, and you need to be willing to kill stuff that is underperforming. By working with any modern ad platform, you're getting into a cage with a bear. Yes, this thing can be incredibly powerful and it can help you smash through whatever goals that you might have. But if you don't know how to control it, that power is suddenly turned against you. It will drain your ad budget while feeding you the bare minimum results to keep you hooked in. Now, I'm also going to be a little bit contentious here and caution you against any agencies that use their relationship with Google as a selling point. This is a selling point, but it's a selling point for the agency, not for you as a client. Now, to pull back the curtain a little bit, as an agency, you essentially buy a closer relationship to Google. You see those agencies that run webinars with Google and are always at Google's office. Well, what Google really wants from those agencies is as much of their clients' ad budget as possible. And it wants that ad budget to test new ad formats, which typically have less transparency and more smart features. It wants those agencies to put their clients' budget into opaque black boxes, which have one sole goal: to drive Google's incremental ad revenue increases over the next quarter. One of the primary roles of a marketing agency, I believe, should be to keep the ad platforms in check, not cozy up to them and regurgitate their sales pitches to clients who think they're getting honest, transparent advice from someone who wants them to win. Meanwhile, all the agency cares about is scratching Google's back in order to get preferential placement on their partner program page. Now, call me a softie, but that stuff and this stuff feels icky AF to me. But like I said, SEO and paid search are incredible channels, two of the most profitable marketing channels ever devised. We make our clients tons of money with them. And pretty much every one of the world's fastest growing and largest companies pour significant budget and energy into these channels with good reason. In fact, that's why all of this stuff happened in the first place. But you need to know what you're doing. Stay safe, folks. Of course, one of the big innovations in the next generation of search is likely to be ranking in these AI search engines. We've been doing pioneering work to figure out how exactly to do this, and in this video, we break down exactly step by step how to rank in Google's AI overviews. We even show you demos of how we've been able to do this and influence AI overviews answers. Before we go, let me know in the comments, were you surprised by the stuff coming out from this Google antitrust case? And does it change your opinion of Google? Until next time, see you soon.